Hi, my name is Anna Turner, and I am a sports dietitian at Ascension St. Vincent's Sports Performance in Indianapolis, Indiana. Today, I'm going to talk about the athlete plates. There are three sports dietitians at St. Vincent's. I just wanted to introduce you to all three of us. I'm Anna. I've been at St. Vincent's for 4 years. Lindsay Langford has been at St. Vincent's for 10 years. And then we have a 1-year postgraduate fellow, Tiffany White. So today we're going to talk about one of the core foundation nutrition topics. This is one of the first things that Lindsay and I talk to our athletes about, which is what you're physically putting on your plate. So we're going to discuss the athlete plates. The athlete plates should reflect the intensity and duration of your training. So we are adjusting our nutrients such as carbohydrates, proteins, fruits, and vegetables to help provide optimal energy levels throughout all times of our training. If you have any specific questions about individual athletes, feel free to reach out to us as well. So these are the three athlete plates. You are also welcome to view the U.S. Olympic Committee guide on the athlete plates on their website, since the U.S. Olympic Committee did create these athlete plates. All three of these plates contain the same nutrients, fruits and vegetables, carbohydrates, and proteins, and healthy fats off to the side. As you'll notice, the difference between all three of these plates really is the distribution of those nutrients. One plate has far more carbohydrates, and one plate has far more fruits and vegetables. And then the other one is in the middle, pretty well balanced. All three of these plates are considered healthy for the athlete. The most important thing is that we're aligning our training with the correct plate to fuel. The first plate, all the way on the left, is the easy athlete plate. We will talk more about this plate here in a moment, but the one thing that I want you to know is that this is the same plate as the USDA My Plate. So most athletes hopefully have learned about the USDA My Plate in school, where it's carbohydrate, protein, a fruit for a quarter of your plate, and a vegetable for a quarter of your plate. That plate is appropriate for athletes during certain parts of their season, but as they start training more, it becomes imperative that we adjust our athlete plate. So let's talk more about the light day plate. So this is the athlete plate, again, that is appropriate for the athlete who is training for an hour or less per day of very light training, such as yoga and light strength training. This plate requires a lot less carbohydrates because it is not a strenuous activity lasting for more than an hour. I'm going to give an example on when this plate is appropriate, and I think it's most appropriate to think of like your job as a coach or my job as a sports dietitian. So as a sports dietitian and a mom, I mostly have a seated at my desk type of job, or giving lectures such as this, or counseling. So if I'm lucky in the evenings, I get to work out for 30 to 45 minutes, an hour at most, is able to fit into my day during this time of my life. So for me, this plate is most appropriate for me, which is why it is the general American standard for how we should eat to be healthy. Let's say I started training for a marathon. Now this plate would need to adjust to accommodate that extra training. So think about your athletes and think about when this plate would be appropriate. This would be very appropriate during the off season when athletes are not doing structured workouts with their coach. This may also be appropriate if an athlete has a temporary leave, such as if they're going on vacation and won't be working out either. As we start training more, the moderate day plate becomes far more appropriate, and what occurs is that we have an increase in carbohydrates. So the carbohydrate section increases, and really all three nutrients now are more equal. This plate helps sustain the athlete who is working out for an hour to 2 hours per day. So this, the type of workout that may occur during that is appropriate for the moderate day plate would be the athlete who is maybe weightlifting for 45 minutes and then has about an hour training session as well. So maybe they're doing the 45-minute lift and then an hour of basketball practice with their coach. This plate is really home base for our high school athletes, home base for our high school, college, professional athletes. For athletes who, this is really like, again, their home base, and then they down regulate to the light day plate if they have, an extended period of time where they're not training. So the moderate day plate, and then now we upregulate to the hard day plate, which is most appropriate for the athlete who is training 2 to 3 hours. So this may be the athlete who has an hour weightlifting session in the morning and then a 2-hour team practice in the evenings. Again, we need more carbohydrates during this time because that is the muscle's main fuel source. We have to continue to pump carbohydrates into our athletes in order for them to have fuel on a daily basis to work out at a high intensity level. Keep in mind, if you've had any exercise training, science training, that as your heart rate continues to rise above conversational pace, and we're now pushing it into the anaerobic threshold, that is when carbohydrates become 90% of the fuel that athletes are using or more. When we're in the lower thresholds of the aerobic, very conversational, think of yoga or think of when you're walking your athletes through a play or doing more skill-focused work where their heart rate is lower, the athletes are burning around 50% carbohydrates and 50% fat. So as we start to push into our training and really increase the intensity and duration of the harder workouts that we're putting on our athletes are now utilizing more and more carbohydrates. So that's why this plate becomes far more appropriate and really needed in order for our athletes to perform at a high level day after day. This is also the plate that is most appropriate for game day. Obviously on game day, we want to make sure that we are well fueled and have enough carbohydrates to perform at 100% intensity for the entire time. So here are a couple real life examples of what these plates can look like. The plate on the right is, for example, eating at a cookout. So I've got a bun representing the carbohydrate, a hamburger representing the protein, and then a half of my plate is fruits and vegetables. Specifically, I had a quarter of it as a side salad, and a quarter was the lettuce tomato that I would put on my burger. So that is an example of the easy athlete plate. Another example of the easy athlete plate would be an Asian salad with a quarter of my plate being the Asian noodles, and then a quarter of my plate being the serving of protein. As we move into the moderate plate, where we're looking at really balancing the 3 nutrients. So balancing our fruits and vegetables with our carbohydrates and our proteins. Again, the goal of this is to utilize the athlete plate for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So although not all meals may take place on an actual plate, some may take place in a bowl. I do want you to think about how the nutrients are equal. So for example, I show over here the ingredients that you would utilize for a yogurt parfait. You've got your fruit, your protein, and your granola. And I show them being equal in quantity. So again, thinking about that. And then as we move to the hard athlete plate, really making sure that half of your plate is a carbohydrate for those game days. The plate on the right, I would say, has a really good portion of carbohydrate, but honestly, I need a little bit more. So to be honest, I would decrease the chicken by a little bit and then add a roll to get in a little bit more carbohydrate to equal half of my plate. The plate on the left-hand side, the spaghetti, this one is a little bit tricky because my protein is sitting on top of my carbohydrate. So if I were to move my meatballs to the portion of my plate where it would be not on the spaghetti, it would be maybe where the carrots are, And then you would notice that the 4 meatballs would take up where the carrots are, and then a quarter of my plate would be the asparagus and the squash. So that would be a really great example of half your plate spaghetti, a quarter of your plate is taking up the protein section, and the other quarter of your plate is the vegetable section. So how are we utilizing these plates throughout our training cycle? So you as the coach understand what the training cycle is going to look like for the year. So I often recommend that my athletes talk to their coach about their training cycle and understand when are the most intense part of the season and when is more of the lighter training, so that they can really understand when to use what plate. So I'm going to use football as an example, and then I'll also show you how to put the plates into these parts of the season. So during football camp, practices are hard, intensity is high, and we're working really, really hard. So this is definitely a very intense part of our season, trying to get in shape. As we move into this competitive portion of our season, we pull back a little bit on the intensity and duration of practice and make it more skill-based work. So focusing on skills and plays really during the week, and then we peak for those game days, again with high intensity, long duration, max effort, obviously on game day. And then we have finished our season, we move into off-season part 1. Hopefully during off-season part 1, most of your athletes are taking a full rest, getting some good rest and recovery, stepping away from their sport for a moment. And then as they move into off-season part 2, where they start training again, now we need to alter our nutrition again. So let's look at how we move through our training cycle in the sport of football with these athlete plates. So come camp season, as a sports dietitian, it's imperative that I'm educating my athletes on utilizing the hard athlete plate. As we move into the competitive season, they would then be adjusting back to the moderate plate on practice days, and then up-regulating to the hard athlete plate on game days. As we finish our season and move into off-season part 1, the easy athlete plate would be appropriate if they're taking full rest. And then as we move into the off-season part 2 and start training again, we need to adjust our plate one more time to the moderate athlete plate. So hopefully that really helps you understand how the athlete is adjusting their nutrition to align with their training, to support their training and provide themselves with the correct fuel and the correct amount of fuel when it's needed. This is an athlete plate handout that is available on my Instagram account that I'll show you here in a moment. So you can definitely download this plate and utilize it with your athletes. My Instagram account is on the left here, Anna_Turner_sports nutrition. If you click the link in my bio, it will take you to a list of options. And one of those list of options, I think it's towards the bottom, it says athlete plates. Click that and you can download the handout. There are also some recipes on there and our services as well, if any of your athletes are interested in working one-on-one with us. We also are offering a coaches clinic, so you can click the link there as well to learn more about that. Lindsay Langford is more active on Twitter, whereas I'm more active on Instagram. So her Twitter handle is LangfordSportsRD. And then you can also follow Ascension St. Vincent Sports Performance as well on Instagram at Defining Sports. Thank you so much for listening to this week's lesson on the athlete plates. I hope this was helpful for you and for your athletes. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to follow me on Instagram, DM me and ask questions, or submit questions to svspnutrition@ascension.org. Thanks.